Hello, everyone, and wonderful to have you here, and thank you for sticking around. Right now, we're going to be...
Hello, everyone.
I am going to be muting my
thank you for
other
around.
stream. Just a second.
Right now.
There we go. Thank you, Erin. That was an amazing workshop that we just had. I learned so much. That was super cool. Next up, we're going to be having a presentation by narrative systems designer Inari Bourguenolle on the topic of liminal narratives in games. And the discourse on game narratives tends to focus on scenario, branching, and dialogue, but small capsules alter the player experience in various ways. Inari will be talking about creating stories hidden in in-between moments, from loading screens to hubs. Do we have Inari on the line somewhere?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There we go. Hi. How are you feeling?
Great. What about you?
Pretty good. I got my glass of water, so I'm happy.
Same here. I just noticed that I cannot be displaying both the chat and my slides. So if someone asks a question, can you just tell it to me?
Yes, I will. I will let you know. Do you want me to send you a message through Discord or just say it here?
Oh, it can be said here.
Yeah, it's on the side, so.
Yeah, it's all right.
Do you want the questions at the end of the presentation or during?
Well, I think it's better if it's on the moment. Just let me finish my slide in general.
Yes. All right. Okay. I think you'll do great, and good luck. And
thanks.
I'm looking forward to hearing about this topic.
Thanks. Is the share stop? Has the share started? Oh yeah.
Yes, right. Share started.
So hi everyone. I hope your game jam is doing very well. I hope you rested because so many people forget to do this. So make sure to sleep. I will be talking today about liminal narratives and the place they can have in games in general. It's something that is not necessarily the most useful in game jams, but it's small things that you might find of use at some point. I'll first introduce myself, then we will be talking about loading screens, then checkpoints, and lastly, hubs in games in general. Let's go. So hi, my name is Inari. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a narrative systems designer currently working at Ubisoft Ivory Tower in the beautiful city of Lyon in France. You can find me on Twitter at InarReflection. I'll tweet a lot about narrative design in general, so feel free to follow me. I've been working on tabletop RPGs for the last 10 years, and also I worked on a board game that uses artificial intelligence to make sure everyone knows the rules and the universe, and also to challenge people. As far as video games are concerned, I've been working on social games as well as serious games. And more recently, I started working with the Crew IP at Ivory Tower, and that's me. Let's start now. So what are liminal narratives? So basically, anything in 2 words has to have its double definition made. So liminal means on the threshold. So basically in between 2 spaces. A threshold might be between the outside in your own house. It can be so many different things that it's hard to find everything that is liminal. And narratives are ongoing sets of stories. So it means there's no end, and every time you add something, it just makes the thread thicker, kind of. So if you put those 2 together, you have stories told on thresholds. And that's precisely what we're going to talk about right now. My first example is taken from Final Fantasy VII, which is a game that marked me as a child because it was so well made. The scenario was breathtaking for me, but there was also something very, very specific that I wanted to talk about today. So it's the moment when you're loading. When you're changing your disk, actually, because you're in between 2 moments and there was something really amazing that happened at the end of the first disc, and I was like, what's going to happen now, what's going to happen now? And I really was stressed out by my will to go forward. And yeah, that was my first time experiencing liminal narratives in video games, and it was something, well, at least acknowledging I was experiencing it, and that was something really moving for me. Second example is a bit more recent. In Dark Souls, you get campfires that serve as a gameplay point, but they also have their narrative function, as they provide you with a safe space where you can just rest for a bit, chill a bit before you move on to the next hardship that are coming to you, because yeah, that's Dark Souls. So it was hard before, it's going to be hard after, but at least at that point, you're safe. And the mere perspective of getting there to refill your potions, etc., is some narrative experience that really goes with the flow of the game and puts you in the shoes of the character you're playing. Lastly, just to keep following the thread of the talk, Hades has a huge, well, not huge, but amazing hub, which is fairly easy to navigate. You just died, and you get back to this place with warm colors around the fires, and everyone you love and care about in the game that is here, not all the time, but can be, and you're just in that space where you know you won't die anymore, and you can just enjoy time with people you love. And that's what makes this hub very strong, in my opinion. But liminal narratives are not limited to video games. One example I often give is the one from Two Broke Girls, which is an over TV show. But at the end of every episode, you get this money count that summarizes kind of what happened to the characters, and you're like, oh, but they need $25,000. How are they going to move forward from there? Because they lost so much money. Sorry, and yeah, that very small capsule really creates something different from other TV shows that I really wanted to express today. Let's move out to loading screens.
Yeah, we have some comments in the chat. We have a few hellos from Tarja and from Glassabon. And then Erin X says, "This is incredible. I had never considered the narrative implications of these spaces."
Oh, yeah. They're often overlooked, as we will see in a few short moments. And yeah, just transitions can mean a lot. I know in some games, depending on whether you picked the right branch in a labyrinth, for example, the color of the transition is different, either white or black. And just because of that, you have a complete enigma to solve, and it's amazing. Is that all commentaries?
About? Yes. There's a Pikachu as well.
Oh.
Pika! Yeah, that sounds super cool, that idea with the labyrinth that changes kind of color and all of these things.
So I custom made a loading screen just for you. And that is pretty much what happens with most people when a loading screen is involved, and it's just a black screen with a loading circle or logo, whatever. So in the recent years, like the 20 last years, we've been developing an intimate relationship with our smartphones. So everything we do nowadays makes them part of our lives. Like my own smartphone is right by my side as I speak. So it's whenever you put something that removes the player from your narrative or your game in general, you're losing the battle for attention, because they might go to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and that moment where they stop just for a few seconds, but those few seconds can become a minute or more well, you're losing immersion, and your game gets a less impactful effect on on your player. So now more than ever, time is money. So make sure not necessarily to force your player into staying in front of your screen. We're not in a Clockwork Orange. Just make sure there's something of interest on that screen. And if they want to go to something else, they can, but at least they have something to remain involved into what you're offering them for their money.
We have some more comments.
Yeah, no problem.
Regarding. So Red Marmot is saying the Final Fantasy VII CD change was so stressful for me. I was scared of doing something wrong with the console and losing my progress. Lots of crying emojis. And Glossabon says, me reading the first line with side-eye while on my phone, I feel attacked.
Yeah, that was kind of the point of that loading screen. But I'm the first one to do this. I'm playing a lot of JRPGs, and every time there's a loading screen, I'm moving to my phone, at least to check a guide, to get some more knowledge about the game, but sometimes just to go on Twitter or to check my notifications. So I won't blame anyone, because that's how we live as a society these days, unfortunately. Is it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I had to unmute.
I'm checking, no problem. So let's talk numbers that I got from the CMK, so the Customer and Market Knowledge Center of Ubisoft. More than half players are doing something unrelated to the game during loading screens. So like literally this is 1% out of 2 that is not involved in the game when you're putting a loading screen. And if they're very long, you're doing yourself harm. And 1 player out of 2 as well changed how they are playing to avoid loading screens. So that means possibly grinding in a zone to make sure everything is done so that they never have to come back and suffer another loading screen, because those are a pain to work with when you're a player. Also, 1 out of 2 players all admitted to dropping out of a game because of loading boredom, of frustration. So this is a serious matter, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. So we will be discussing a bit about what can we do to improve this in the coming minutes. Comments? Not asking before I switch to the next one this time?
Not at the moment, but I think those are really, really big numbers. Those are huge. Considering a lot of developers think of loading screens as just an inevitable thing that, they're just there. But in general, many developers have this idea that, gamers aren't real gamers if they drop out of boredom or frustration or don't do that, which is, a bad attitude to have, I guess.
Yeah, clearly. It's clear it's a bad attitude to think that about players. So the consequences of someone leaving is, on short term, their immersion is broken. So they're not into your game at the moment. And they can come back a few moments later, but it's not the same. Their emotional journey is disrupted. So basically, you're building something really intense over the long run in your game. And every time they drop out, even for a moment, they're not involved in the game. So their feelings about it just vanish for a moment. They might come back, but they will be weaker due to that pause you created. So we have to be very, very aware of the effect of a loading screen on that. And if you put too many loading screens, your player might stop to do something else that is more respectful of their time. So be careful. On the medium and long term, the engagement declines because the emotional journey is rendered meaningless if interrupted too often. Your player loses interest, and some people might even review bomb you because of too many long loading screens. So that's actual hazards for your game. No question?
No questions at this point.
Yeah. What can we do? We can repurpose loading screens. Repurpose being redesigning, as design comes from the French word dessin, which means purpose. So yeah, let's all redesign loading screens. So most games actually know what is needed in a loading screen. So is the game still running? Yeah, you use an animation like a logo rotating or stuff like that. It's fairly easy to show. I did the one on the black screen I used was actually made with a GIF. I just had to select 4 pictures and that was done. So anyone can do it. Is the loading still going, and how is it going? Is another question. Not every game is displaying a gauge to show the player that the loading is moving forward, but they're less likely to drop if they know how long it's going to take to move forward. For example, if you're playing League of Legends, you're more likely to do something else if you're in the first like 80% of the gauge, but if you're in the last part, players won't leave the screen because they know the game is about to start. So having this information just helps the player knowing what's their time window before getting back to the game, and it can make them involved because they're waiting for the loading screen to end while looking at that gauge. And yeah, that's another emotional thing you can do, and even tricking the player, just making the last person a bit longer to empower them when it's over. Just don't cheat and don't make this just something that is graphical, in the sense that it has to display actual facts about the loading. It's always better if it looks nice, like any game, I guess. And depending on the type of the game, we might have other stuff to put there so that they remain engaged. And let's get to them. Yeah.
There's a question. Does any game show a minutes estimate for the loading? We have that for downloads, but not game loads. Are there any drawbacks of showing time?
So yeah, there are drawbacks. Basically, if the time is changing, it's frustrating. If the time isn't right, it's frustrating. So it's dangerous. I don't recommend doing so. Some games are doing it, but I think it's mostly for when you're patching or installing them. I think in game it's a bad choice, and that's why it's not done that much. Yeah.
And there's another comment from Red Marmot. I've always been told that the loading gauges were lying to me. I have progress bar trust issues.
Yeah, and sometimes they're right, because if you know the amount of information you have to load, well, you can count how much you're supposed to load. Like when you're playing, I will take League of Legends again, but they know precisely the amount of information they need in every game, so those gauges are fairly decent compared to what you need. But yeah, trust is what binds a player and their developer. So yeah, let's make sure we do the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you. I think those were the comments for now.
Instead of the gauge, as an alternative, you can just put, when you're mostly done with the loading, you can have something saying, your game will start shortly. I don't know, that's just an option, but creating the difference between you have more than 10 seconds to wait and there are only 10 seconds left to wait is something you might do that helps your player. So, stuff you can put in loading screens. You can put your amazing art because you did it. Most of the time you had to make concept arts for doing your game. So basically showing them can be a little eye candy for the player. They actually like it in general. Those can become their, how is it called? Background on Windows or stuff like that. So yeah, still stuff that makes the work you've been doing for the last years or weeks or days, if you're in a jam, a bit more meaningful and at least not lost. You can be exploring the universe of the game by giving details about the content. So this example from Fallout 4 has the 3D model, but you also see a bit of lore and trivia about what is shown. You also see the progress gauge for the character, telling them, "Hey, you're moving forward. Good job." And the last example there is from Katamari Damacy, and you have the big bad villain that is talking to you and threatening you. So yeah, this can help creating relationship to characters, especially villains, which we don't speak that much to in most games. Questions?
Not at this point, but those are super cool ideas for what you could actually put there, and examples from what games are using at the moment.
So when I say fantasy, I mean fantasy in the sense the player fantasy. So what they're expecting the game to be and how they want to feel. So in a game like World of Tanks, on the upper side. By the way, the game on the top part is Haven. It's a peaceful RPG where you heal animals and you can enjoy the relationship between the couple on screen. And the loading screens actually change as much when you move forward with their relationship. Just so you know. So yeah, in World of Tanks, you want to feel like a strategist and someone who has a careful plan that is executed afterwards with your team. So some people made this mod so that they can do this precisely. So planning the game together with their team and then going on to battle. If it's interactable, it's even better, like allowing the player to add some notes on the map the way Breath of the Wild does, saying, yeah, I have to go there, and then I will be moving there. I will be flanking them from there. That's tactical information that is used by your player and allows them to feel like a strategist and like a real person on the battlefield. In Bayonetta, you can be playing in the abstract scene, and since the game is all about executing combos and defeating your foes, there you have both tutorial training round, and you still feel like being Bayonetta during this. So yeah, feel free to use it. If you were wondering, the Capcom actually had a patent on playable loading screens, but this one expired 6 years ago. So you're never allowed to do it. And the last thing would be staying in the game like Mass Effect 1 and 3 did, not the second one. And yeah, you have your characters standing in elevators, which are actually hidden loading screens, and they're talking together, creating some more bond, or you can be hearing the radio, etc. And all of this is participating in how you experience the game in general. I think, yeah.
No questions at this point, but like that Mass Effect 1 elevator music, first time I heard that on the Citadel, I was just like laughing to myself. I was having so much fun. And every time I go into an elevator in the game, I'm like, so what's the banter going to be? It's such a great way to kind of hide that you're going from an area to another.
It was
with a little bit of humor as well. You might have been in a gunfight and then you go into this like da 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 kind of music.
This is an actual nice player rest while staying in the diegesis. Unfortunately, it was hated by the player, and that's why they removed it from the second game. But it came back in the third, and at that point, there's even humor there because Garrus actually asks, "Am I the only one missing those elevator talks?" And yeah, it's very meta. And it was
but I think it's so I've been playing the Legendary Edition, and I guess there might have been a shift in player base as well, and what player base expectations are, and what player base appreciates. Because I haven't heard from anyone playing this now that the loading in elevators would be hated. So it's interesting how games can change with their audience.
Yeah. So now I will be taking the example of Persona 5 and 5 Royale because there's a wide array of loading screens in the game. The top left one is actually fairly nice because it changes depending on the day, depending on the weather, depending on the time you're playing. When you're changing parts of the day, like when you're moving from the high school to your home, you have this metro animation, which is a loading screen, and the later you are, the colder the colors and the less people there are into it. In this one, you can see a nurse that is covered in blood. I think it's from Halloween actually, but I might be wrong there, or a zombie walk, whatever. But yeah, this loading screen is fairly nice because it remains it's part of what the game says. Like, you're living the everyday life of someone. So a loading screen that is showing you the metro part is fairly interesting. In France, we have something saying metro, working, sleeping, or, well, it's nicer said in French, but this is basically what our days are. And yeah, that's what this loading screen is saying. The second one is participating, in the middle, is participating into the Phantom Thief fantasy with the day moving forward, which is what the game does every single time. But you have the knife stopping on the day that is selected, and it's fairly smart to remember, yeah, bullseye. And at the bottom right of the screen, you also have this survey and comments from the public telling people how they feel about your group. And it doesn't seem like much, but actually it has a very big impact on how you perceive the game, etc. And there are even twists with it, so be sure to pay attention to that part when you're playing the game. And the bottom right one is the traditional, there's not much to see on that screen, but the game is actually very tongue-in-cheek at that point because it's saying, take your time. Well, everything is under the clock in the game. A question or comment?
We have a comment from Red Marmotte, Metro Boulot Dodo.
That's exactly it in French. And yeah, it sounds a bit better than when it's said in English, I guess. In the end, it's all about the player. We're not making games for ourselves. Well, we can be, and that's perfectly fine. But when you're making a professional game, it's for the player. So be mindful of what they want and of what they need, because loading screens can be the only way the player has to relax himself or themselves in between gameplay phases. And also, it's nice to ask for input before going back into the gameplay. I've started so many races in car games. Well, I've been away because of a loading screen, and the race started without me, so I had to restart the race, so reload the actual setup, etc. And it's pretty cumbersome. So just possibly create the option to allow to wait for the player before moving back, because if they have a kid, possibly they might have to leave during a loading screen, and they don't want to miss out on something right after your loading screen when they come back. Last time I gave this talk at PG Connect, I was asked, yeah, the next generation will remove loading screens, so how do you think this will affect your theory? Thing is, with every new generation, we're like, yeah, we will have no more loading screens because the consoles will be so much more powerful. Thing is, when you're starting the new generation, you have to be crossplay. So basically, you have to keep having loading screens because you're using the theoretical power of the new console, but you still have the restrictions from the former one. So still loading screens. At some point, they will disappear for the big open worlds where, well, at least they will be hidden somewhere. But when we will reach the end of the next generation, well, we'll have the exact same issue because the next console will be even more powerful. So having loading screens doesn't make your game less valid. And that's it for loading screens. Any questions?
Let's give the Twitch chat a few moments for questions. But I had a sort of question, like, what do you think about why do we see so little gameplay or mini games during loading screens? Wouldn't that be something we could do quite well?
So I don't hear you that well, but I guess you were asking about minigames during loading screens, and that's what the patent from Capcom was about.
Yes. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so in the 90s, they started the Dragon Ball series mostly, but other games as well. But this one was most famous because when loading for combat, you could smash your square button to make little aliens go out of holes, and you had to have the most aliens going there. It was a fairly fun minigame to wait with at least. And yeah, they kept it patented for 20 years, and they didn't renew it in 2015. So now we can do it. I think it's all right to use those, but I think those, well, they have to be low stakes. You can, however, reward your player for playing those be smart with it. But yeah, something that is chill and that doesn't negatively affect the player if they're not doing it. Like the best example of such a minigame would be the Tyrex run when Google is down, when internet is down on Firefox. I think this shouldn't be more than this.
Yeah, and I mean that is it Firefox or maybe Chrome? Either way,
maybe Chrome. I never played any of those.
Yeah, I never get it, and my internet is always down on Firefox. I'm guessing that's not where it is, but yeah, I think that could be a very kind of interesting avenue. And then I mean, if you even gave some kind of in-game benefit from having a super high score in that, you might, be kind of consoling your players on lower-end devices with long loading times in a way.
The best thing I would love games to do, but it's not necessarily appropriate, is like, for example, Persona 5, when you're loading screen, possibly you can text with your characters, your teammates, etc., because you're always stopped in your game flow because of conversations that happen when you're in the 3D world. So possibly loading screens can be a nice place to do it.
Yeah. I'm not seeing... So there's a comment, brain still processing all the awesome information. So I have a second kind of question that I prepared for you, which is what's your thought on when we have, for example, multiplayer games that have a lobby or this kind of situation? Would there be space for similar narratives there?
Well, when you're waiting in most games, you can interact with other players. Like in Fortnite, if I'm all right, you can use your animations and emotes, etc. So I think these lobbies are a very nice place to express yourself and to feel the bond that you can create with other players. Like everyone is doing the same dance there, so you can create a happening. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be expressed in lobbies in general through the use of emotes and possibly chat functions. Some multiplayer games actually allow the people to chat when you're in the loading screens, and I think this is a great thing to do because they can plan together. It's something I think is missing from League of Legends, for example.
Now we have a question from Hagalatskano, or similar pronunciation. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure. Says some games have on the loading screen tips for the game. What do you think about this? And do you know if players commonly like or hate them?
So new players might like it. Players that know your game very well hate it on the long run because they feel they're treated like a child at some point. So you have to be very careful if you do this. It's it's nice to have it, especially since some information might have been missed during some parts of the game. But yeah, it's easily redundant. So possibly at some point in the game, you have to switch the tips from gameplay tips to lore tips, possibly.
Yeah, I personally am a person who learns controls very slow game. I've been very much appreciating those kind of things, especially during the 10, 15 first hour of the game. Oh, I seem to be dropping with my internet.
Yeah, possibly what you can do is putting gameplay tips and putting an option in the menu, removing those and replacing them with the lore tips. And this way, someone who is already familiar with your game can just switch it and just have the lore tips. However, the lore tips can be redundant at some point as well. So yeah, careful.
Yeah, and it of course also depends on how your game is revealing lore. If it's, for example, through codex entries, then do you show any that the player hasn't unlocked, for example? Or you might have players who are both very good at getting the gameplay tips or on their own and do not explore any of the lore. So they might actually not want the lore either.
Yeah.
Which is of course also, well, considering your player base basically is I guess the...
Yeah, you can put the three options: none, lore, gameplay, or both. That's 4 options. I didn't think of both when starting the sentence.
I think one of my favorite kind of loading screens that I've been staring at throughout my whole youth is the one in The Sims. It has a progress bar, and then it has messages about kind of in game.
Yeah,
what are they actually doing? And they're funny, kind of like I can't remember any of them, but at level of drilling holes in the macaroni kind of things. But they kind of make it so that you, and since they always happen kind of in the same order, you also sort of like start to remember like, okay, we're close to finish on this.
Yeah.
And then if your computer is having a super slow day, you might see more of them than you usually do. So you might kind of notice the ones that usually go like to 30% in one go, and then now you get to actually see what was in there.
Oh, that's already 40 minutes. I have to move a bit forward.
Yes. Of course. Sorry, I thought we were in the QA part.
Yeah, no. So checkpoints. You're in Helsinki, so you're probably familiar with Control. The checkpoints in Control are fairly nice as well, because that's another time where you have a safe space when you reach them. You have to clear them, but it becomes somewhere you can improve your character and also fast travel. They might be taken back by the hiss at some point. It's fairly rare, but that's something that can happen and create some more emergent gameplay. So I think it's a nice feature to have. And that's pretty much it. I'm just giving examples. So the purpose of checkpoints is mostly safe spacing, because it's a pause time. Your player can stop, just think about what they lived, think about what they're about to leave, and those are amazing exit points, because when the player comes back, they know they won't be threatened immediately by the game. So that you're just allowing them to emotionally pause, possibly leave, and then come back later. So checkpoints are amazing. They're my best feature ever. They're a safety net. Like the longer your player has had to live without saving or passing a checkpoint, the more cognitive, the more load there is in their mind. So it allows them to free them a bit and lowers the tension before moving forward. It's fairly nice. So shortcut, like I said, it can allow fast travel from one checkpoint to the other, and that saves a lot of time in many games. A progression milestone when you reach a checkpoint. Yeah, I'm going to improve my character because I cannot do it at any time, etc. And the last thing that they can do is preparing the player for what's ahead. In Final Fantasy VII, when you had a save point, it was either because you ended up a huge zone or because there was something dangerous ahead. So I still don't have to this day the habit of saving if there's no saving points. So yeah, make sure you can help the player this way. So the leaving opportunity part is the moment where I said that the player can leave at that point. What can be added as functionalities that are in games is talking to NPCs. So maybe they're always around those points and you can talk to them like in Control. You can talk to your favorite characters in the main checkpoint. Build management and quest management. So the billboard stuff and the customizing character can be done there. And lastly, the item consumption can be altered. Like in Dark Souls, you refill your potions, like I mentioned earlier. I'm trying to be a bit fast to finish. It's the second time I'm too short. So checkpoints can be a positive getaway to leave rather than a game over, because your player chooses to leave in a state that they feel satisfied with most of the time. So yeah, it's a nice way to let them leave, because the last souvenir they get from your game is that moment of safety after something big. So yeah, it's the best place to leave them. And one of my favorite checkpoints are at least the meditation circles in Jedi Fallen Order, because they fit the narrative. You can improve your character, and it's even used in the story. I will be short with hubs as well. Those parts are fairly short compared to loading screens, which are big. Maybe a few questions for the checkpoints, or is there?
Yeah, there is a few comments from Red Marmot. I've always found it funny when Wii loading screens would literally tell you to go outside and stop playing. Quite an extreme opposite example. And then from the Finnish Game Jam, so from Björn probably, the sound design of loading screen is super important. Nothing more annoying than very repetitive music, except if it is for humor. And I guess one kind of interesting thing with the checkpoint as well that relates to the cognitive load is, especially in puzzle games, it might be quite a good sort of sign that now you have solved this area, time to move on to the next one.
Yeah. So hubs, I guess, since those are mostly comments and I need to finish this. I really love hubs because they're an amazing safe space, and you have a recurrency pattern because every time you get back there, you feel a bit more like home, even though on the long run it might be too repetitive. I will talk about one hub that is a bit problematic in my opinion. But when you get back to the hub and you see the characters you love, you feel good in your game. Like if you get back to the Normandy, you have those amazing characters which you talk to and learn a bit more about as often as you get back there. But yeah, don't force the player into getting back there too often. It might, annoy them. And like I said, they should be as low friction as possible. So don't make the player lose themselves. Don't make too many odds of getting attacked there. Like I think hubs should be a very safe space with no loss aversion. Like don't say, oh, someone might attack if you're not prepared enough, because that creates stress. And I don't think that's always right. It can be right in some games like Valheim, but not always. This is the problematic hub I was talking about. This is Sanctuary 3 from the last Borderlands. It's the ship where you're basically going back there every 45 minutes. So every time you moved forward with the main quest, you have to get back there and go through this map. So you spawn there, where you have your item bank, stuff you didn't pick up, and also the possibility to spend your experience points. But you have to get over there to be able to see your boss and to travel the world. So in between, you get lost because the map is terrible and the guidance. Well, you have to learn the ship by heart. I think it's not low friction. However, I think it's very representative of how they make ships on Pandora, which is the planet where the former Borderlands happened, because it's always scratches they put together. So yeah, scraps. Sorry, they put together, and yeah, it creates an anarchic architecture. So that's not exactly low friction. And also, in terms of coherence, if you're in the command room, since you have to go all the way to the back, then go to the lower deck to get back to the safety capsules, it's a bit hard to survive, I'd say. So what to do with hubs? So putting interesting characters so that the player can create meaningful interactions with them, so that they feel at home, so that they can have parasocial relationships and fight loneliness, especially during lockdown times. Allow the player to have useful actions there, so respecting your character or stocking items for another character or for this one but later is something that can be really nice, and allow them to express themselves through customization, choice, or possibly playing emotes if their friends are there. Hades hub is a very effective one, like I mentioned. It's easy to navigate. You just go straight forward, and everything in the background, etc., guides your eye towards where you're supposed to go. So fairly easy to navigate. You have all the characters, your quest givers, you can customize stuff. It's, yeah, a very good example. So like I said, they can be beneficial for both players and developers, and create moments that the player want to talk about with their friends. And that's what we need nowadays. One of my favorite hubs, which is basically where all the game happens, is the one from Spiritfarer, where you gather your friends, let's say friends, and spend meaningful time with them, cuddling them, and taking care of them before leaving them for their last journey. And that's it. That was speedrunning for the end, but we're there.
Awesome. Do you have a few minutes for questions? I think there's nothing in the schedule that's stopping us from going a bit over time, but of course we want to be.
You should have told me that earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, let's see. Finnish Game Jam says on the stream, I've had problems in Skyrim where you get attacked while stuck in dialogue options and you can't quit the dialogue quickly. That combines with the game auto-saving just when you open dialogue, which created a tricky situation.
Yeah, that's a bad design. That's what I think. At some point they paused the game when you're talking. It was maybe in Oblivion, though, or Fallout, so that you don't die when speaking to people. But yeah, autosave is tricky.
Yeah, and I personally, from when we were talking about hubs, one of my favorite gameplay moments ever, and this is very spoilery, so don't listen if you don't want spoilers, is from a game where the hub is destroyed mid-game. You've played for long enough that if you haven't had the spoiler, you think that this is going to be a permanent hub. And then it's destroyed and you move into another one. And it's amazing.
I don't know what game you're talking about, so but yeah.
It's a BioWare game.
Okay. I would fight against loss aversion, but against if the player can know this can happen, it's all right. But yeah, if you say
it's
think
it's
permanent.
It's permanent, it's inevitable, it will happen. But in that game, you do not customize your hub.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you're not like losing your investment. But it is a huge kind of like it's the end of an act, and it creates a huge kind of splash as a narrative beat.
Are there questions? and
I think
comments.
there's a Spiritfarer love in
Yeah.
the chat, and then there's a question. A lot of hubs expand as you progress in the game. Are there any tips on how to communicate that to the player to make sure they notice it when new options are available?
So basically, you can create, make them spend something to get the new zone, because they will feel they chose it. So basically, in Hades, there's stuff you have to pay for with rewards you got from your roguelite runs to be able to enjoy. So when you put something new, well, either you force you can put a quest or an objective mark, but that's very inelegant. But if you induce the player into choosing to get this, well, they will use it because it's theirs, not yours. If you catch my drift.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also kind of, player invests in something. They feel that, okay, now this is more mine in a sense.
Yeah.
And
the hub,
of course,
sorry, the hub is kind of part of the player at some point. So yeah, it's they feel like they're customizing it, but in fact you're tricking them into doing so. That's design.
Yeah. And of course, it also has the kind of added benefit that if you put a resource kind of price on doing the customization, then the player can't just breeze through that either.
Yeah, you just have to use a low stakes investment, or possibly if you want them to have it at some point in the game, just give the item needed to the previous boss, and that's it.
There's another comment from Red Marmot. I'm wondering if this is a typo, but the KO Garden in Sonic Adventures is the perfect hub. I think every player dreamed of moving there and live in it forever.
I've never played that game, so I cannot help. But possibly.
But I guess it speaks to that the hub is usually an area that you will remember as a player.
Yeah, because you structurally, hub means the center of a wheel. So basically everything revolves around it, literally. And yeah, you go out, you come back, and it starts to feel like home in the game.
And kind of like, speaking of that, do you have any kind of thoughts on so different games treat getting back to the hub quite differently? So you'd have something like, I guess in Dark Souls kind of games, you have specific items you need to spend, or then you need to use the bonfires, for example. Do you have any thoughts on kind of like what can make returning to your hub a more measurable experience or more of an interesting thing?
So the example from Hades is fairly interesting to me because it's a game where you keep dying and retrying. And if you remove the hub, the experience is completely different. If you just have the equipping room and then get back to fighting, you might feel a lot like the game Rogue Legacy. The hub actually, like, it's a low stake moment. It's another pace. It's a place where you get to spend your many currencies, but also a place where, well, you're welcomed because everyone there mostly loves you except your father. And you have a lot to do there. If you go, on the other hand, on Borderlands 3, where you're almost compelled, well, in Hades, you're compelled to get there because it's the game structure. In Borderlands, the story forces you to get back to the hub every single time. To see the exact same character that is calling you on your phone all the time when you're not there. So it creates a very weird feedback loop because why is she telling me to come and see her when she can just pop over and talk to me in my head? So yeah, very cumbersome. So how can we make this easier to manage for the player? Well, I'd say don't make them go there more than once an hour, because it's starting to be too much, and there's actually no strict advice I can give, because once an hour for Hades is a bad idea, because now my runs are 25 minutes long, so that means at least twice or thrice an hour. But if you're going onto an RPG, well, it depends on whether there's a loading screen to get there. Possibly there's no good advice, because so much thing depends. It depends on so many things. The way you manage your hub, I'd say.
Yeah. And of course, the method of how you can be quite interesting. For example, in a game like Stardew Valley, where you need to go run around everything, and then you need to make it back to your home before it gets too dark, or you get a penalty for passing out in the town. So it's quite interesting how games solve that.
Well, you're not forced. Well, I think Stardew Valley is a good example, because the game is it's medium paced. Like, you have a lot of things to do under the clock, and there's stakes about how will you succeed in getting back to the hub, and it changes the experience a lot. But I've read about someone lending the game to his girlfriend, if I remember, and she made it a totalitarian experience where she wasn't talking to anyone in the city. She wasn't going back to the hub, and just was working because it was the best way to be effective. Like paying the hospital or the penalty was less hindering than not doing so. So yeah, you can. There's a lot of way to manage and like everything in game design, it depends on what you want to give your player. Like the same solution can work in a game and not in another. So there's no absolute in game design, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then a question here that some players want to just return to the game fast, but then you have to navigate to the hub to get back. Are there any good design choices you can make to make the hub less repetitive? I guess this ties into the Borderlands 3 hub.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Well, the problem with Borderlands 3 hub is the interactions there with other characters are meaningless. So the hub is meaningless mostly. Everything you do there can be done anywhere, basically. The respecking, maybe not. The item banks, etc., are not elsewhere, but there's no meaning to Sanctuary except that it's a safe space most of the time. There's one or two occasions where you get attacked. So yeah, not forcing the player to get back there. And if you want them to get back there, well, give them a reason to. So it's not give them a quest reason to, give them an emotional reason to, like give them the opportunity to get back and spend meaningful time with their characters, like in Fire Emblem, where you can have tea with the characters you like. Stuff like that. It's a bit better.
Yeah, that sounds really cozy. Let's look if there's any last questions on the stream. The Twitch, I mean. I guess you are able to see those now yourself as well if you're curious, but I can read them out if there's anything.
Well, I can stop my sharing. Share. Stop screen. Oh yeah, stop screen. Yeah. I can see myself now.
Awesome.
Comments. Sometimes, where were we?
I think we're at the end of the comments at the moment in the chat. Yeah, I mean, this was really interesting and really great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Amazing.
It's a pleasure.
And I guess you're on our Discord server. So for any jammers who have further questions, you can get in touch.
Yeah.
There is a channel for asking speakers questions, but of course, I guess you can probably be pinged somewhere else. Do you have any social media you'd like to plug or any projects you want to advertise at this point?
I remained on my last slide with my Twitter account, which is again in our reflection. And that's it. I speak a lot about narrative design, even though I'm not very active these days because of work. But feel free to follow me. There's a huge thread where I used to post every single day about narrative and/or game design. And feel free to get some inspiration.
It's a wonderful thread, and it's so great that you're doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's everything for now. For our stream watchers, if I remember correctly, and I will double check this because yesterday I said a wrong time and it was confusing. But we're back on the stream at 3 p.m. with the We in Games collaboration panel breaking into the game industry. And we have some amazing speakers coming up there and cool perspectives on what it means to be LGBTQIA+ and work in the game industry and how to get there, what you can do in order to improve your chances of getting employed, and what different ways you can get employed in the industry. So yeah, I recommend everyone watching the stream to tune in for that. And again, big thank you to Inari for joining us here.
Thanks a lot. Remember to sleep tonight for the jammers.
Yes. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.